Today we're talking about the Sony A7 III, and not just some of the specs. You all know the specs. We're talking about the intimate reasons why I and a lot of creators, photographers, and filmmakers chose this camera so many years ago. And it's 2021, so how does this thing stack up? Is it still relevant? Short answer, absolutely. So we're gonna talk about all the stuff that actually matters about this camera. I'm gonna help you decide if it's right for you, and I'm gonna tell you why I think this is still one of the best value for money cameras here in 2021. Number one, the Sony A7 III is a hybrid camera and one of the best to date. And what I mean by hybrid is that it shoots everything well. It's a master of none, but it does a lot of things really, really decently. For photography, it's phenomenal. You can produce some incredible results in video, and everything that you need is going to be there. But again, it's a master of none. For video, if you want to take it to the next level, we've now got the Sony A7S III, but the A7 III is capable in its own right. It's capped at 8-bit, it shoots 4K 30 and 1080 at 120. And honestly, that's gonna be ample for most people, but for hardcore creators, for filmmakers that are really looking to get into video, well, the A7S III right now is one of the best cameras for the money that you can buy. Anyways, we're talking hybrid. And on the other side of things, it also has to be a great photography camera. And it is. It's one of the best and most all-around cameras that you can still buy. And I'm gonna tell you why. 24 megapixels, that's why. Some people have a hard time deciding whether or not they should be upgrading to a higher megapixel camera. And let's just squash that right now. If you're not sure that you need those extra megapixels, 42, 61, whatever it is, you really don't. And the reason for that is you're probably not going to be utilizing all those megapixels. You might need to crop in it once in a while, but there are trade-offs. One is low light performance. The A7 III's 24 megapixel backside illuminated sensor is an absolute beast in low light. It's got 15 stops of dynamic range, meaning it's going to be great in pretty much every condition. 24 megapixels is said to be the sweet spot, and it is for a lot of reasons. One is what your computer can actually handle. When you start getting into big files like 61 megapixels like you see in the A7R4, it gets a little bit silly in your computer when it comes to editing. You can experience lag, slowdown, not to mention the insanely huge file sizes that you're gonna have to store somewhere. And trust me, that adds up. Here's some perspective for you. The A7 III raw file sizes come in at 47.3 megabytes for uncompressed files and 23.8 megabytes for a compressed raw. Now that means roughly every 10,000 photos, you're looking at a minimum of 238 gigabytes of space that you're gonna need, and a maximum of about 473 gigabytes, or about half a terabyte. The A7R III file sizes are just under double, meaning you're gonna need somewhere in the vicinity of 410 to 820 gigabytes of storage for every 10,000 photos. And the newer A7R4 with its incredible 61 megapixels is gonna need more than 1.2 terabytes if you're shooting uncompressed RAW. Pretty crazy stuff and definitely worth considering. So keep that in mind. If you don't need to print huge, insanely detailed prints, or you're not gonna be cropping in 2, 3, 4, 5 times in, well, the 24 megapixel sensor in the A7 III is probably gonna do you just fine. So it's a great performing, proven sensor that's been used in several of Sony's cameras, and they're a leader in sensor technology, so the A7 III obviously is gonna stand the test of time in that regard. We've got photo capabilities. It shoots insanely fast 10 frames per second, so you can shoot sports, you can shoot wildlife, you can shoot anything, from landscapes to football. It really doesn't matter. This is gonna be a great all-around photography camera. And although small, the ergonomics of this camera are actually pretty good. Everything's right there where you need it. It's got lots of custom buttons. And for me, there's really nothing missing. Some people argue that it could have used a flip screen, which did come later, and we can probably expect that on the A7 IV. However, after using a flip screen in some of the newer cameras, I have to say for photography, it doesn't always equal better. Sure, for creators, it is nice to have a flip screen, but again, it's a hybrid camera, meaning it's got to be great in every regard. Now, who's the A7 III for? Can you get away with it as a professional camera? Absolutely. It's got dual card slots, which means redundancy, so you can take it to professional shoots and not have to worry about one card dying. So it's covered in that regard. It can absolutely produce professional results. And these days here in 2021, there is a ton of amazing glass available to us. Maybe before the E-mount did struggle a little bit with lens selection, but now it's almost overwhelming with lens choices. Now, having said that, here's a look back at some of the stuff that I've taken over this past year or two using dozens of different lenses that I've reviewed, showing you exactly what this thing's capable of. I happen to own a range of lenses, and not just Sony lenses, not just G Master lenses, but also budget-friendly lenses as well. We've got a ton of options. There's incredibly well-priced and amazing value lenses in companies like Tamron and Samyang. And if you've got the budget, we've got Sigma's amazing Art series, as well as Sony's own native G Master lenses. Now, because of the A7 III's amazing autofocus system, I like to stick to autofocus lenses, but there's a lot of people who love manual lenses. And they're in luck because for the E-mount system, there is an ever-growing amount of incredible manual focus lenses available, and more coming out all the time. In a lot of cases, they can be significantly cheaper and even as fast as f/0.95. Now, the lenses that you're checking out here are lenses that I've reviewed fully on the channel and can fully and completely recommend to you. Obviously, I can't include every single lens, but if there is one specifically that you're looking for, I most likely have a review on it, so make sure you check that out. If you're thinking of coming over from another system, do note that you can buy adapters like the MC11, which will make your transition easier as you can use your lenses, but not necessarily take advantage of all the autofocus features and whatnot. I don't necessarily recommend that you use adapted lenses in the long term, but as a transition, that's absolutely fine. Luckily at this point, there are lenses for everybody's budget. You can even produce great results with the kit lens. There's lots of zooms as well as primes, and drop down in the comments which one you prefer. Overall, when it comes to lenses, there's definitely no shortage of great options for you. So if you're considering upgrading from a crop sensor, or maybe you're coming over from a different camera brand altogether, rest assured that there is a ton of choices for you and you definitely won't be disappointed. Now, getting back to video a little bit, it is capped at 8-bit, meaning you're not going to get that crazy 10-bit range. But again, at the same time, it's file sizes, it's editing power, and for most people, the 4K 30 and the 1080 at 120 in 8-bit is going to be ample for your workflow and your needs. Like I said, pretty much everything on this channel that you see has been filmed just about 100% with the Sony A7 III. It's what I'm filming on right now, and it's my go-to in 99% of the situations that I encounter. It's also a great camera for photographers who might think they want to get into video later on, because even in auto settings on video, just your standard picture profile, you can get some pretty great results. And if I'm being honest, it's only really been the last half a year or so where I really started to dial in my video footage and actually start color grading. So you can get away with some really nice video once you just learn the basics. Now, there were a few factors that won me over a few years ago when I purchased this camera, and of course I was considering things like the Canon EOS R, which a lot of people probably still are. One of those things is its 5-axis in-body image stabilization, or IBIS for short. And although it's not the world's best, it does make a big difference when you're shooting with primes without image stabilization, or you're shooting at lower shutter speeds, and that's still a feature that a lot of other cameras don't have. So that was a huge thing for me. And another one is the battery life of this camera. The Z-type battery for Sony cameras are industry leading, and honestly, you can shoot all day. They're phenomenal, or if you're shooting video, you can get hours and hours of video. A huge upgrade from Sony's last generation of batteries, and again, one of the main reasons that I chose to upgrade to the A7 III from my old Canon camera. Now, I have absolutely no brand loyalty. I'm not paid by Sony, nor do I have any problem going into another system if they stopped innovating and moving forward. That's just me personally. So again, I think there's a lot of cameras that offer a lot. I just think the Sony A7 III in this day and age is still one of the best value for money cameras. So how much does this thing cost? Right now, you can find it for around $1,700 US. And if you can swing an education discount, you can find it for $1,500. Now, nothing else comes close to that value. So even at $1,700, it's an absolute steal, and it's going to be more than enough for your photography and most of your video needs if you're a beginner to intermediate filmmaker or photographer. That I promise you. This camera has personally taken me to places I could never imagine. From taking the channel to tens of thousands of subscribers, to earning my spot on Team Canada for the World Photographic Cup. It's literally a dream come true, and I'm so thankful that I pulled the trigger on this bad boy. By the way, guys, I wanted to say if you made it this far, thanks so much. If you are an E-mount shooter or if you're considering switching to E-mount, you're gonna need a lens, and I'm gonna be giving away this Viltrox 85 portrait lens to one of you subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, consider doing so now. All you gotta do is hit that like, subscribe, and drop a comment down there introducing yourself to me and the community. But back to the camera, I could wholeheartedly recommend this camera to pretty much anybody across the board. The other cameras, the A7S III, the A7R4, are very niche cameras. I recommend those to professionals with very specific needs, where the A7 III is still a hybrid camera doing photo and video very well, but not the best. And again, for me, for what my needs are and my shooting style, it just works out perfectly. So what about the A7 IV? That thing should be coming out pretty soon, right? Well, we really don't know. And should you wait for that, or should you pull the trigger on the A7 III? Well, you might wake up tomorrow and get hit by a bus. You never know. So my advice to you is to pull the trigger on this bad boy. It's ample for what most people need, and honestly, you can grow into this camera so much. At this point, we don't know a heck of a lot about the A7 IV or when it will be released, but I promise you it will be quite a bit more expensive. Other than that, I wanted to address a few of the issues you might have heard with the Sony A7 III. Now, I've taken well over 30,000 photos with this camera, as well as countless hours of video. Now, knock on wood, I have had no issues with this camera whatsoever. Now, there are some reports of some shutter issues with the Sony A7 III, and I can confirm that it is a very small percentage of the population of these cameras. So if it is a big concern, either buy an extended warranty or just be aware that if something does happen, it might cost you $300 to $400 to fix. For me, I'm constantly shooting very fast moving subjects, and it's never been an issue for me. There's also been some reports of some issues with the mic port. Now again, I've used it extensively, and I haven't really babied this camera. I've used the heck out of it. And luckily, I use the mic port all the time and haven't run into any issues either. So do keep that in mind, and I'm really unsure at what that repair might cost. But again, all cameras are gonna have wear and tear, and every camera system is gonna have its issues. Nothing's perfect. So there's my thoughts on the Sony A7 III. I can't recommend it enough to you, and I will drop affiliate links down in the description if you wanna pull the trigger. It helps out the channel and it's much appreciated. If you did like this video and you wanna see more just like it, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, join the community, and like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See ya.